What's up, squad? It's your squid. I've just written a script about Charles Sturt and about the discovery of Lake Hope, or naming of Lake Hope, and yeah, you're about to listen to it. I didn't want to spend the whole time going like this at you as I read the script, so you're going to get a bunch of pictures on your screen as you listen to me. If you like the content, do me a solid and like the content. Hit the like button, or it's down there now actually, I'm not filming a short. If you hit the like button for me, do me a solid. Consider joining me on Patreon or joining the channel. I like money. Turning some of your money into mine on a monthly basis would be ideal, but no pressure or anything like that. If you're still here at this point and you didn't skip my ads, that's good enough. Anyway, we'll get into it. We'll get into Charles Sturt, and as I said, I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments section what you want me to look into next. Thanks, guys. Charles Sturt was born on April 28, 1795, in Bengal, India, while it was under British occupation. He was the eldest of 8 sons and one of 13 children of a judge in Bengal under the East India Company. Sturt was educated in England at Harrow School and at the Royal Military College in Sandhurst, and he joined the British Army in 1813 and served in Spain, Canada, France, and Ireland. Sturt was born into a wealthy family, and he received a good education. Despite this, he showed an early interest in adventure, and he often went on hunting and fishing trips with his father, where he seemed more at home than when he was in the halls of aristocratic colonialists anyway. In 1827, Sturt was assigned to accompany a ship of convicts to Australia. He arrived in Sydney in May of that year, and he was appointed military secretary to the Governor of New South Wales, Sir Ralph Darling. Sturt quickly became fascinated by the Australian landscape and began to explore the interior of the continent almost immediately. Sturt arrived in Australia in 1829, and he quickly began exploring the interior of the country. Most notably, he led an expedition that discovered the Murray River, which is the longest river in Australia. The expedition set out from Sydney on January 7, 1829, with a party of 7 men. They followed the Murrumbidgee River to its junction with the Murray River, which they named after Sir George Murray, the Secretary of State for his colonies, and then they continued down the Murray River, reaching Lake Alexandria on February 18, 1830. The discovery of the Murray River was a major achievement, as it opened up the interior of Australia to further exploration based on the access to water that was previously thought not to exist. Sturt's expedition also helped to promote the settlement of South Australia, which is why so many things in that state are named after him, just in case you weren't aware. He continued to explore the interior of Australia throughout the 1830s. He made several important discoveries, including Lake Eyre, the largest lake in Australia, and Lake Hope, which is nowhere near as impressive, but worthy of a mention because of how and why he named it that, in my opinion. But first, some context. We'll get to that. Sturt's explorations were not without their challenges. He and his men often faced harsh conditions, and they were sometimes attacked by hostile Aboriginal people whose land they were encroaching on. A man named John Harris had died of dysentery while on a Sturt exploratory mission, and another named William Hopkinson died of heat stroke as well. It should probably go without saying, but exploration in unknown lands can be fairly dangerous. As I said earlier though, in my opinion, one of the most interesting things about Charles Sturt is his naming of Lake Hope. In 1844, he and his men were exploring the interior of Australia when they came across a large lake. The lake was dry, as were their mouths, because depending on which diary entry you believe, they'd either gone a week without food and water, or several days with very little food and water, and put simply, they were in a bad way suffering from the conditions they put themselves in. Charles Sturt and his expeditionary party camped near Lake Hope one evening as they considered turning back to make the perilous return journey to their settlement. They encountered a group of Aboriginal people, though, the Ngarrindjeri people, who were initially wary of Europeans and refused to come near to the camp. Sturt won their trust by giving them gifts, including dyed clothing and tobacco. Eventually, the Aboriginal people came closer to the camp and began to trade furs with the Europeans as well. Sturt was impressed by the Aboriginal people's knowledge of the land and their ability to survive in the harsh desert environment. He also noted that they were a peaceful people who showed no signs of aggression, and he noted in his diary that they'd gifted his party with a sweet bread, which, you know, would require farming, baking, and other concepts that the general zeitgeist don't credit Aboriginal Australia with being capable of at that time, but I digress. The interaction between Sturt and the Aboriginal people near Lake Hope was relatively peaceful. However, there were some tensions, as the Europeans were encroaching on Aboriginal land. Ultimately, the Aboriginal people were forced to leave the area as the Europeans continued to explore and settle the land. Sturt is said to have named the lake after his hope that Aboriginal peoples and the British colonies would one day come together and live in unison without warfare, just as he and that group had, and I think that's a lofty goal given the time period he was from. Sturt's interactions with the Aboriginal people near Lake Hope were relatively positive in hindsight. He was impressed by their knowledge and skills, and he treated them with respect. However, it's important to remember that Sturt was a product of his time, and his views on race were shaped by the prevailing attitudes of the 19th century. He believed that the Aboriginal people were inferior to Europeans, and he saw their displacement as something that was inevitable. Today, we would view Sturt's interactions with the Aboriginal people in a different light. We would recognise that he was a coloniser and that his actions contributed to the dispossession of Aboriginal people from their lands. However, I think we can and should also acknowledge that he was a complex figure and that there were a lot of people doing a lot worse than trading clothes and food with the people they encountered while they were exploring. Just as a couple of messed up examples, explorer Angus McMillan proudly boasted about killing Aboriginal babies as they slept next to their mothers, and explorer Frank Hahn would do the same, but what's worse about Frank Hahn is that he had a necklace where he hung severed ears of babies as some sort of morbid collection or trophy or something. So, yeah, Charles Sturt wasn't exactly Noni Hazelhurst or anything like that, but I think it's important we don't lump him in the basket with McMillan and Hahn either. Sturt's naming of the lake is a reminder of his optimism and his belief in the future of Australia. Even though he faced many challenges, he never gave up hope. And we shouldn't either, but I'm getting off track again. He returned to England in 1832 to recuperate from some health problems and write about his expeditions. He returned again to Australia in 1835 after publishing his diaries in England, and he settled in South Australia, where he was appointed Surveyor General and a member of the Legislative Council. He resigned from his government positions in 1851 and returned to England, where he lived until his death in 1869. Sturt's later life was marked by declining health and financial difficulties. However, he remained a respected figure in the Australian exploration community, and his work helped pave the way for future explorers. I think Sturt's legacy is one of courage, determination, and of a pioneering spirit. He was a true Australian explorer, and his work helped to shape the course of Australian history. I think Sturt was one of those blokes that we look at unfairly through the modern lens. I believe that if he was alive today, he would be left-wing, and he would disagree with some of the thoughts that he had back then. He's a product of his time, and I hate saying that sort of thing, but his actions clearly indicate he was not comfortable with treating Aboriginal people with disrespect, even though he thought they were a lesser class of people. It's complicated. If you enjoyed this, do me a solid, hit the like button, it's down there, leave me a comment, tell me who you want me to look into next, and I will. And yeah, if you want to give me a super thanks, it's the last day of the month, I'd like to hit that threshold, but you know, no pressure. Hit that subscribe button and I will see you when I look at you. You'll see me when you look at me. Thanks so much for watching, guys.